today with Caitlin Kapoor, and we are going to be talking a little bit more about gluten. So earlier this week, actually last week when I'm posting this, I asked a question about what is gluten, and we talked a little bit about it, and you guys asked more questions about why gluten specifically is bad for us. So I asked my friend Caitlin Kapoor, who is a health coach, who uses primarily holistic functional medicine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
That's okay.
I just messed up what you said.
They're very intertwined.
We actually live in Bellevue, not too far from each other, and kind of met randomly when she moved here. So, but she is a lot more knowledgeable than I am on the topic. So I wanted to spend a couple minutes talking to you about why is a natural ingredient like gluten bad for us, and why does it affect so many people when it's kind of naturally occurring in the world?
Yes. And I have a lot of different thoughts on that. So hopefully in a future scenario, we can really dive deep. But on the surface, I think there's two wings. And you had mentioned one when we were talking about the use of pesticides in wheat.
Right.
There's a high usage in the States of glyphosate, Roundup on wheat products. So there's a contingent of people that are worried about the sensitivities that we're seeing are related more to the pesticide use, because people can eat wheat here or not eat wheat here, but go to Europe where they don't use Roundup and be fine. I've seen that happen a lot with a couple of clients of mine. I hear it a lot in the community of that thing being talked about. So I think that's one wing of it, is a sensitivity to the pesticides used in modern wheat agriculture.
Right.
There's the history of changing the wheat from the wheat that existed 200 years ago, how it's been sort of modified over time to be a higher yield, higher gluten product than it was hundreds of years ago, and we haven't evolved as fast enough to keep up with that.
Okay.
Human evolution just goes at a much slower pace.
Would that be considered like a GMO, like the genetically modified side of it?
There are possibly, and just GMOs aren't the same as hybridization too. You can make species of plants different over time, not necessarily through the insertion of changing the genes, but sort of how we breed dogs over time from the wolf when looking for certain traits, like over generations of plants. So that is also done. That's been done with wheat.
Okay.
And then there's the side of it where I think this also could have been going on all along, but we finally said, let's look at the food. People have been having sensitivities, itchy skin, bloating, and hormonal imbalances, and food sensitivities in general run the gamut of symptoms. There's a bajillion symptoms, and people go to their doctor with these vague symptoms, and they're like, maybe you're depressed, maybe you have depression, or arthritis or chronic fatigue syndrome. And we've just been told for decades now that it's this syndrome, and here's the prescription that matches that, and you're sent on your way. And we've only in the last 20 years decided to say, maybe it's the food, maybe it's the way we eat. And so what functional medicine doctors do is they strip it down and they look at the root cause, and they're the ones who are diving into food and lifestyle and stress. And the reason that most functional medicine doctors do support and encourage their clients and patients to adopt a gluten-free diet is because they are focusing on a syndrome that's pretty popular, not popular, but being talked about more and more these days in conventional medicine as well. It started in the holistic community, which is leaky gut syndrome.
Okay.
And so that is when the junctures, there's these tight junctions, villi in the small intestine, which are meant to be a barrier wall between food particles and the ecosystem that lives inside the intestines versus the blood outside of it, the system outside the body. So when we abuse our intestines, these junctures get loosened up, larger food particles can start sliding through, bacteria, so it can shoot off the immune system. There's a large immune reaction, and these things can be mild and build over time to the point where you've been dealing with it for decades with just little nuisance things here and there. And finally, there might be a tipping point in your 60s or 70s. It could go on for a lifetime, these just mild little things. And it could have been your gut all along being slowly loosened up and weakened over time. And what gluten does specifically, they found, is release a protein a byproduct called zonulin, which specifically acts on the tight junctures of the intestines.
Okay.
So there's other things that loosen up these junctures too, but gluten now is seen even in people who don't have celiac disease.
Right.
This loosens up the intestinal walls.
So that could be...
It's an inflammatory protein.
When people say, and this is what I say, I've never been tested for celiac, but I say I have some level of gluten intolerance.
Yeah.
I don't feel good when I eat it, so it's probably...
Yes.
That's what's causing.
Well, the funny thing is about all the reactions that people have to gluten, I recommend everybody just go take a look at celiac.org, even if you don't think you have celiac disease, because it's look at the possible symptoms of either childhood and adult celiac disease. The symptoms, you can be asymptomatic for your entire life, but you're still at risk for increased intestinal cancers and other things if you continue to consume gluten. There's depression and migraines and itchy skin and all sorts of weird GI things, but they're so vague that I kind of feel that everybody across the board should just be tested for celiac disease at this point. 80% of people with celiac disease are walking around there undiagnosed is the current thought. Because it's so insidious and the symptoms are so all widespread and mimic so many other diseases that it's not something that's taught well in medical school. You really need to find someone who's celiac savvy if you suspect it could be you, or even if you're just somebody who suffers from really random things, chronic migraines. Most people go to neurologists. Would never think to get tested for celiac disease. But it could have been celiac all along. People think it has to be diarrhea and constipation.
Right.
Most people don't even have those symptoms with celiac disease. And then non-celiac gluten sensitivity mimics celiac disease. So even if you get tested and you don't have celiac disease, but you try taking gluten out of your diet and you might feel better, then they would say you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which is being more and more accepted in the conventional sphere of medicine now.
Right.
And it didn't used to be. So we're making strides and improvements, but I think that's the tip of the iceberg, I guess. But that's a lot.
Right. No, that's good. And I know I've talked to so many people, my customers and followers and friends, about what kind of prompted them to go gluten-free and what were the symptoms. And the main thing I could say is what I've seen over the last 10, maybe not quite 10 years, but is the symptoms are so random. And, anywhere from, I had a friend who her bone density was decreasing.
Well, osteoporosis is a sign of celiac disease, of unchecked celiac.
And she had no idea until she was running a marathon, I think, or training for a marathon when she hurt herself very badly. And that's what kind of prompted some of the testing to be done. And that's kind of an off the wall one, but I've heard a lot of different things. And we have we have Caitlin's son here with us too. So but so that's just the tip of the iceberg on maybe why we haven't heard a lot over the last 50 years about gluten being an issue, but now more and more it is something. It is something we hear more about. So
in the kitchen.
Thank you all for tuning in. And we're going to post a little bit of questions about if you guys would like to hear more. You can follow Caitlin on Caitlin's Cupboard on Instagram.
_cupboard.
And I'll tag her so you can follow her. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.